Hi, ladies. I'm Lisa, and I stand before you as both a guide and fellow traveler. 5 years ago, I found myself sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., wondering who I was outside of the relationship I just lost. That moment, that rock bottom, became the foundation upon which I rebuilt not just my life, but my relationship with myself. Since then, I've guided many women through their own journeys of self reclamation, not just healing from heartbreak, but discovering that the most important relationship they'd been neglecting was the one with themselves. Today, I'm here to show you how the end of a relationship can become the beginning of the most loving partnership you'll ever know, the one with the woman in the mirror. The self-reclamation method I've developed isn't about getting over someone else. It's about coming home to yourself. This isn't another distract yourself until it hurts less approach. This is a profound homecoming to parts of yourself that have been waiting for your attention, perhaps for years. At the core of this work is radical truth. The relationship that ended wasn't just external. It revealed a disconnection from yourself that likely began long before someone else walked away. The 5 phases we move through, honoring your truth, reclaiming self trust, creating sacred boundaries, cultivating self devotion, and authoring your next chapter, form a complete pathway back to yourself. What sets this approach apart is that we recognize you don't need fixing. You are whole and complete already. You need remembering the voice inside that got quieter with each compromise, remembering the desire you set aside, remembering that you were whole before this relationship and you remain whole after it, even when it doesn't feel that way. Women who complete this journey tell me the same thing. I never imagined that losing someone else would lead me to find myself. They develop an unwavering self trust that becomes their compass. They learn to speak their needs without apology. They become discerning about who earns access to their energy. And perhaps most importantly, they discover that being alone is entirely different from being lonely when you genuinely enjoy your own company. This isn't just about surviving heartbreak. It's about using this turning point to create a life where your relationship with yourself becomes a foundation that all other relationships must honor, not compete with. Let me speak to what might be painfully familiar terrain for many of you right now. In the aftermath of a relationship ending, it's natural to focus on what you've lost externally, the partner, the future you'd imagine, the shared jokes and routines that made up your daily life. But there's a deeper loss that often goes unnamed, the loss of your relationship with yourself that happened slowly, almost imperceptibly, while the relationship was still intact. Maybe you recognize yourself in some of these patterns. Perhaps you began prioritizing their happiness above your own, not as an occasional compromise, but as your default setting. Maybe you became fluent in predicting their needs, while your own became whispers you stopped hearing. You might have found yourself shrinking your opinions, your desires, your presence to maintain peace or hold their interest. The constant calculations. Is this worth bringing up? Will this trigger an argument? Can I live with the discomfort rather than rock the boat? Became so automatic, you hardly noticed them happening. You became exquisitely attuned to the weather changes in someone else's mood while becoming a stranger to your own emotional landscape. When friends or family pointed these shifts out to you, you likely defended the relationship. You don't know how good it is when we're alone. Relationships require sacrifice. No one's perfect. And there was probably truth in those statements. Or perhaps you were so good at hiding these shifts that most didn't even notice. But beneath the statements or behind the shift lived a growing distance from your own truth. Then the relationship ended. And in that ending, you're faced not just with the absence of another person, but with the realization that you're not entirely sure who you are without them. Their opinions, preferences, and needs had become so intertwined with your own that separation feels like losing parts of yourself. This creates a particularly painful paradox. You desperately miss someone whose presence in your life had gradually disconnected you from yourself. You long for a relationship that, in truth, may have been asking you to be less than you are. The aftermath comes with its own complex landscapes. Sleepless nights, replaying conversations, the exhausting performance of I'm fine when you're anything but, the secret shame of checking their social media, each post a reminder of life continuing without you, the well meaning advice that makes you feel even more alone. Just focus on you, as if you remember who that is. What's especially confusing is how your logical mind and your emotional heart seem to be operating in different universes. You can list all the reasons the relationship needed to end. You can acknowledge the red flags, the incompatibilities, the compromises that were ultimately too costly. And yet, your heart still reaches for what's familiar, even when what's familiar wasn't serving your highest good. This disconnection from self does not heal automatically with time. Without intentional reconnection, many women find themselves repeating variations of the same pattern in new relationships. The faces change, but the dynamic of self abandonment remains, creating a cycle where each ending brings you further from yourself rather than closer. The truth that rarely gets spoken is this: the most devastating aspects of heartbreak isn't losing someone else's love. It's realizing how thoroughly you may have lost touch with loving yourself in the process of loving them. This disconnection from self isn't just an emotional inconvenience. It's the invisible thread that connects virtually every challenge women face after heartbreak. When you've lost touch with your voice, needs, and boundaries, the impact radiates through every area of your life. First, it affects your ability to heal. Without a strong connection to your authentic self, you're more likely to measure your recovery by external metrics. Whether you still cry, whether you can see their social media without pain, whether you're dating again. But true healing isn't these outward signs. It's about restoring your relationship with yourself. When that remains broken, no amount of time or distraction creates genuine wholeness. This self disconnection also profoundly impacts your future relationships. Without clear access to your own needs and boundaries, you'll likely attract partners who reflect your relationship with yourself. If you're still treating your own needs as optional, you'll unconsciously seek out people who do the same. If you don't trust your own perceptions, you'll be drawn to those who are happy to interpret a reality for you. And the professional costs are equally significant. When you've learned to shrink yourself in personal relationships, that pattern doesn't simply disappear when you step into your career. You bring that same energy, that same hesitation to meetings, negotiations, opportunities that require you to be fully seen. Your brilliant ideas remain unspoken. Your value remains unclaimed. Your potential stays locked behind the habit of making yourself smaller. Perhaps most insidious is how this disconnection from self erodes your sense of agency. When you've been looking to someone else as a source of your worth, happiness, and direction, their absence leaves you feeling not just heartbroken, but rudderless. That question, what do you want, becomes terrifying when you've spent months or years orienting yourself around someone else's wants. And this isn't just about emotional discomfort, it's about nothing less than the quality and authenticity of your life. Every day lived disconnected from yourself is a day not fully lived. Every choice made from fear rather than desire takes you further from your most fulfilled path. Every boundary unclaimed leaves your precious energy vulnerable to depletion. And here's what makes this even more urgent. These patterns don't simply fade with time. Without intentional intervention, they become more deeply ingrained. The longer you live disconnected from yourself, the more normal it feels, until self abandonment becomes your default setting rather than a temporary coping mechanism. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about recovering from one relationship, it's about reclaiming authorship of your entire life. The journey back to yourself isn't a luxury. It's the essential foundation upon which everything else in your life will be built. The self reclamation method provides a clear pathway through 5 transformative phases, each designed to strengthen your relationship with the most important person in your life, you. In phase 1, we're honoring your truth. Most approaches to healing rush past this crucial step of fully acknowledging your experience. In this phase, we create space for your complete truth, not the filtered version you share at brunch with the girlfriends, not the brave face you put on at work, but the raw reality of what you've lived. Through my truth without judgment process, you'll learn to hold your full experience with compassion. This isn't about crafting a narrative where you're the victim or the villain. It's about honoring the complexity of human relationships and your participation in them. We'll explore questions that most healing approaches avoid. What parts of yourself did you set aside in this relationship? Where did your inner voice try to speak up? And how did you silence it? What needs remain unmet even before the relationship ended? This isn't about dwelling in the pain or assigning blame. It's about creating an honest foundation for everything that follows. When you can acknowledge how you may have abandoned yourself, not with self criticism, but gentle recognition, you create the possibility of making different choices moving forward. The breakthrough arrives when you can hold your story without it defining your worth. When you recognize that what happened is part of your experience, but not the entirety of your identity. This shift creates space for new possibilities to emerge. In phase 2, we're reclaiming self trust. At the heart of a healthy relationship with yourself lies trust. Trust in your perceptions, your feelings, your needs, and your boundaries. This trust gets eroded in difficult relationships, often so gradually you don't notice until it's significantly diminished. My intuition reclamation practice brings back the wisdom, and you're going to trust your body. We begin with simple and profound questions. What feels good in my body? What creates tension? What brings a sense of expansion versus contraction? These sensations are your internal guidance system, one that may have been ignored for far too long. This phase involves confronting the ways you've learned to doubt yourself. The maybe I'm overreacting thoughts, the I'm being too sensitive narratives, the habit of seeking external validation before trusting your own experience. Through specific practices, you'll strengthen the muscle of self reference, checking in with yourself first before collecting the outside opinions. We'll also address the fear that often accompanies self trust. When you begin honoring your perceptions and needs, relationships that depended on your malleability will naturally be challenged. And this will bring up very real concerns. Will I end up alone if I start trusting myself? Will people leave if I stop accommodating their needs at the expense of my own? The transformation happens when you realize that self trust isn't selfish, it's essential. When you recognize that relationships built on self abandonment aren't actually serving either person. And when you experience firsthand how honoring your truth creates the possibility for connection based on authenticity rather than performance. Phase three is all about creating sacred boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that keep others out. They are the loving container that allows your relationship with yourself to flourish. This phase is really all about defining and protecting the sacred space that exists between you and the world. My boundary blueprint method helps you identify four essential boundaries: physical, emotional, mental, and digital. We explore the areas where these have been compromised, not just in romantic relationships, but in family dynamics, friendships, and professional settings. This work takes courage. It involves recognizing how people in your life have benefited from your porous boundaries and how they might resist when those boundaries strengthen. It means becoming comfortable with temporary discomfort for the sake of lasting self respect. I'll help you develop personalized scripts for common boundaries setting challenges. The ex who wants to stay friends when that doesn't serve your healing. The friend whose drama constantly overrides your needs. And the colleague who assumes your time is endlessly available. The family member that expects you to be available for anything they may need. The breakthrough occurs when you begin to experience how proper boundaries don't create distance. They create the safety necessary for genuine intimacy. When you stop abandoning yourself to keep peace with others, you become available for relationships that honor all of who you are, not just the convenient parts. In phase four, we're cultivating self devotion. This phase transforms your relationship with yourself from one of basic maintenance to one of active devotion. It's about becoming the partner to yourself you've always wished someone else would be for you. My daily devotion framework helps you create practices that demonstrate your commitment to yourself. This isn't about occasional self care when you're depleted, it's about ongoing self partnership that prevents depletion in the first place. We explore four domains of self devotion: physical nourishment, emotional attunement, mental clarity, and spiritual connection. In each area, you'll develop rituals that remind you of your worth, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. This phase challenges the belief that prioritizing yourself is selfish or that your needs should come last. We examine how cultural messaging, family patterns, and past relationships may have reinforced the idea that your value lies in what you give to others rather than in your inherent worth. The transformation happens when self devotion becomes your natural set point rather than something you need to remember or convince yourself of. When caring for yourself becomes as automatic as breathing, when you no longer require external permission to meet your own needs. And then phase five, authoring your next chapter, the final phase. It's about stepping fully into your power as the creator of your life. Rather than letting your past define your future or waiting for someone else to give you life meaning, you claim your authority as the author of your own story. My vision integration process helps you clarify your values, not those you inherited or adopted to please others, but the principles that matter to you. From this foundation, we create a vision encompassing all domains: relationship to self, connection with others, purpose, expression, and contribution. This isn't about creating rigid 5-year plans. It's about connecting with the essence of what you desire and allowing the form to emerge organically. It's about distinguishing between goals that come from genuine desire versus those driven by some external forces or validation or the need to prove something. We'll also address the fears that naturally arise when you begin creating a life on your own terms: the fear of failure, fear of success, fear of visibility, and the fear of disappointing others. Each fear gets acknowledged not as an obstacle, but a signpost pointing you toward your growth edge. The breakthrough arrives when you shift from identifying primarily with your past wounds to becoming actively engaged in creating your future. When you move from surviving what happened to deciding what happens next. This isn't about denying your experiences, it's about ensuring they become part of your wisdom rather than the entirety of your identity. Throughout this journey, you're never alone. You're held by both my expertise and a community of others who understand exactly what you're navigating. Together, we create a container where your transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable when you commit to showing up for yourself with the same loyalty you once gave to others. Let me tell you about Mia, who came to me 8 months after ending a 6-year relationship. On paper, she was doing everything right. She had deleted his number, thrown herself into work, joined a kickboxing class, and even gone on a few dates. But something felt hollow about her progress. As she put it in our first session, I'm checking all the boxes and moving on, but I still feel like I'm performing my life rather than living it. When we began our work together, an unexpected truth emerged. Mia hadn't just lost connection with her partner, she'd lost connection with herself years before the breakup. The relationship ending simply made this disconnection impossible to ignore any longer. Through our truth without judgment process, Mia realized she'd been abandoning herself in small ways since the relationship's early days. She'd given up weekend hiking trips she loved because he preferred staying in the city. She'd stopped expressing opinions after noticing they led to tension. She'd even changed her laugh, making it softer, less noticeable, after he commented one time in public that it was a bit much. Now, these weren't dramatic sacrifices. They were tiny compromises that seemed reasonable in isolation, but collectively amounted to a profound self abandonment. By the relationship's end, Mia had become so accustomed to orienting around his preferences that being alone felt like losing her navigation system. Our first breakthrough came during the self trust phase when Mia began reconnecting with her body's wisdom. She started noticing how certain decisions created either expansion or contraction in her physical body. The friend who always left her feeling drained, contraction. The job opportunity she was considering out of fear rather than desire, contraction. The apartment she'd been hesitant to apply for because it seemed too nice for just me, expansion. By following these internal signals, Mia began making decisions that honored her needs rather than accommodating everyone else's. She created a boundary blueprint that included not just her ex, but several relationships that had been depleting her energy. She practiced saying, I need to think about that, instead of her habitual, sure, no problem, when requests came her way. The self devotion practices were particularly transformative for Mia. She created morning and evening rituals that bookended her days with self connection. She reclaimed Sunday mornings for solo hiking trips, something that had once been essential to her well being. She began speaking to herself with the same compassion she naturally offered her friends. 6 weeks into our work, Mia sent me a text that captures the essence of her journey. I realized something today. I'm no longer afraid of being alone with myself. In fact, I actually enjoy my own company now. I used to fill every minute with noise or people because I couldn't stand the silence where my own thoughts lived. Now, those quiet moments are when I feel most at home. The most profound shift came during our vision integration work. When we first started discussing her future, Mia could only frame it in terms of what she didn't want. She didn't want another controlling relationship. She didn't want to lose herself again. But As her relationship with herself strengthened, she began articulating what she did want with remarkable clarity. She realized her career in corporate marketing had been chosen partly to please her achievement oriented parents. While she excelled at it, it didn't light her up. Through our exploration, she reconnected with her long abandoned interest in environmental conservation, something she'd set aside as impractical years ago. Within a few months, she began to transitioning to a role that combined her marketing expertise with her passion for environmental work. She moved into that apartment it initially seemed too nice for just me. She established clear boundaries with her family about their comments on her single status. And when she eventually did start dating again, it came from an entirely different place. As she put it, I'm not looking for someone to complete me anymore. I'm whole. I'm looking for someone who wants to share their wholeness with me. Today, a year and a half after our work together, Mia isn't just over her breakup. She's genuinely grateful for it. Not because it wasn't painful, it was devastating at the time, but because it became a doorway to the most important relationship of her life, the one with herself. As Mia told me recently, if he hadn't left, I might never have found myself. And now that I have, I wouldn't trade this relationship for anything. The journey to self reclamation isn't about perfection, it's about presence, showing up for yourself with the same loyalty, compassion, and devotion that you're giving to others. It's about recognizing the relationship you've been seeking externally begins within. The truth is, your heartbreak isn't just a wound to heal, it's an invitation to come home to yourself, perhaps for the first time. The disconnection you feel isn't from another person, it's from the woman who you were always meant to be. I want to be completely transparent with you right now. This work is not always comfortable, but on the other side of this discomfort lies a freedom that no external relationship can provide. The freedom that comes from knowing that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. So here's what I want to offer you today: a completely no strings attached 15-minute discovery call with me personally, not an assistant or a team member, but with me. This isn't a sales pitch disguised as a consultation. This is 15 minutes for us to explore whether self-reclamation journey is truly aligned with where you are right now. My calendar link is in the notes um, below this video. Take a moment, click that link, and secure your spot. I've opened 8 discovery call slots specifically for this group, and they tend to fill quickly. During our call, we'll identify exactly where you are in your self reclamation journey and what specific steps would create the most powerful shift for you. Whether you decide to work with me further or not, you'll walk away with at least one actionable practice you can implement immediately. Don't scroll past this opportunity thinking you'll come back later. We both know how that usually goes. The time to begin reclaiming your relationship with yourself isn't someday, it's today. So click the link in the comment section and give yourself the gift of this first step. Remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is with the woman who's been with you from your first breath to your last, yourself. She's been waiting for your attention, and she deserves that 15 minutes. I look forward to hearing from you soon.